Thank you very much for coming tonight on this beautiful sunny June day. We'll be very grateful and thankful that everyone's come tonight. It's a very emotional, passionate subject of many people here, and we're very proud and looking forward to presenting what we've been doing for the last 18 months. We would like to start off by saying thank you to Sally-Ann Hart and Helena, Dollimore. This project's been a sort of a project of yours. You've got it going and keeping it momentum as well, which is fantastic. So thank you very much for them. We'd also like to thank the EA, who have been part of our support and given us the grant to facilitate this. They've been incredibly beneficial, and also Southern Water, who've given us some money, as well as our level and flow meters, which Peter will go on to later. We've raised about 500k, which is great, and that doesn't include the time of the trustees. We give our time for free. We're just very passionate people about nature. We're sort of nature hippies, as you were, but we really believe that that nature can create nature-based solutions for flooding and for flooding events and mitigation, but not just flooding. You know, the Future Landscapes Trust core values are biodiversity. We want to increase biodiversity for agriculture and for species and climate mitigation. We want to sequester carbon out of the atmosphere. We want to manage water both for droughts in the summer and flood events in the winter. We want to increase regenerative food, agriculture that's regenerating our soils, and we want to add social value to you, value to the landscape, for making your lives better, and the lives of nature around us. So we're going to kick off straight into, it's going to have a very similar format to last time. We're going to give a presentation of what we found and solutions. There's going to be a lot of data that Peter's going to very compress and compact for you. And then we're going to take a Q&A after that. So without much further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Peter.
Yes, apologies from Helena. She does have to go to the Rail Action Group meeting in a little while. So although she will be leaving halfway through, she very much supports the project, and we're very thankful. Let me kick off by saying I'm going to take you through quite a bit of data. It's complex. I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. I am the Aspergic nerd who loves this kind of stuff. But if you have any questions, email the email at the back, and I'll explain it to anybody who wants to know in detail. You can ask questions at the end, but if there's anything technical you want to understand, I love explaining complex stuff. That's what my mission in life is to do. So let's kick off. What's the problem at Pett level? Understanding the flooding itself. What is natural flood management? What are we doing and why we need everybody's help? And how can we prove what we're doing is going to make a difference? So they're the key 5 themes of this talk. So let's kick off. We know what the problem is. Pett level floods. It floods pretty badly. So here is our first. So we've engaged a company called Green Curves, who are one of the top hydrological companies in the world, to do a full study of why, how it floods, and then what we can do to stop it flooding. And that's what a lot of this talk is going to be about. So here is a timeline of what they call a flood every 5 years. As you can see, it populates, and you will be able to see the houses you know and where the flood goes. Now that happens once every 5 years. Let's zoom in a bit so you can see that a bit better and let you take in how a flood happens when you have one of these storm events. Oh, is it not started? There we go. Now that data is from what we call LiDAR. It's also a bit of synthetic aperture radar, and it is incredibly accurate. It doesn't matter if there's vegetation, it goes right through there. It understands what the height of the ground is, and it can understand where the flooding happens, and the deeper the shade of blue, the deeper the water is. But if we look at a 1 in 10 year event, you can see it happens quicker. It gets a bit more deep. Now we go to a 1 in 25 year. Now we're starting to get a bit dangerous. It floods faster, it floods more. And this event is actually going to be more dangerous than what happened in 2023. So the event you suffered in 2023 was something like a 15 to 20 year event. It'll happen every 15 to 20 years. Now, let's have a look at what happens every 100 years. Rare event. Very quickly, everything floods. The whole system becomes inundated with water, and it literally, the whole of that part of the village will be flooded. Now, I must stipulate this is a very rare event. It's all about rainfall. So let's start understanding what makes the flood happen and what can be done to minimize it. So we can look at rainfall patterns. Pett level rainfall since 1990. But that's not enough to understand it. What we need to do, this is the data from 2004, and it's every 15 minutes this data is taken. And you'll see these spikes. And the spike that you're interested in here didn't happen on the 16th. This one happened on the 11th. And you had a bigger one here on the 6th of July, 2009. So what's happening here? Let's drill down again. Let's really have a look. So when we have a look at that week of the 16th, what really happened to create the flood was this here. What you had was intense rainfall, not as much as what happened on the 11th, but it happened over a 3-hour period. So we now know we need to analyze water over a 3-hour period. And what we can see is how much water has accumulated in the week preceding. So everything's sodden, the water goes over top existing sodden ground, it runs off quicker. So now we're getting to the real thing. So what I've done here is I've accumulated that 15-minute data into 3-hour maximum. And this shows you now, the same graph shows you how the 11th of Jan wasn't actually that much water, but the peak flow here on the 16th of January. And that's how we start looking at the rainfall data to understand why it causes the flooding. So, first we understand how the water comes from the clouds, and we can understand that very, very well. The modeling done by the experts, way better than what I've shown you, but I'm just trying to explain. Now we have to understand how every raindrop falls. Now the vertical scale's times by 3 here, so it's not really that high. But this helps us understand where every bit of water comes down and how long it comes. But the thing when you model this is you have to understand how fast that raindrop goes over the ground. And different ground has different rates of which the water flows through vegetation. Does it pool? Does it sink into the soil? Does it go straight over? At what point does 3 weeks heavy rain mean that the ground's now sodden and can't absorb any water and goes over? So there's thousands of things go into making this model to understand how every raindrop comes down the valley and hits you. And the best way to explain that is with one of these graphs. So this is the standard thing that all the hydrologists learn when they're first year at university, how all the water comes down at one flash point and accumulates. So we've got the normal river flow, the pink area here. We've got storm water, and then this blue bit here is where houses flood. It's where the river tops out, right? And these boxes here show the rainfall. So we see that there's rainfall happening, an intense rainfall event, and then it takes a few hours, and then it hits where you are, and then you get a period of flooding. And it all comes down together, and that's the problem. So we have to think, how do we stop that water all coming to that point at the same time? How can we break it all up? So we commissioned our friends at Green Curves who've done a brilliant job, and they've modelled 2 scenarios for you. The first scenario is what happened on January the 16th, 2023. And in precise detail, putting all that knowledge together. And then the second model is a 1 in 50-year event. So that's sort of worst case scenario. And when we look at the graphs of the data, this to me explains everything. So the blue line here is what happened in 2023. And it shows you how much water at the peak. Now, this other darker blue line is what would happen if we put all the natural flood management structures across the whole of the catchment. And you'll see those plans, and Ollie will explain those in a little while. But in the worst case scenario, this is what would happen. Floods are dangerous because they're really rare events. Many people can't think 1 in 100 years, but when they do happen, that's when danger lurks. You know, I was lived near Tewkesbury when they had those flooding and all those people died. And people just don't think of that long-term risk. But this is why it happens. Intense rainfall for a few hours, and if you get really intense rainfall, very rare, but it happens, that's why you get this level. Now, the pink line is what would happen if we put in the natural flood management structures. And you can see the difference it makes. It's ginormous. Now, you're still going to be flooded. It's still going to be worse than it was in 2023. But that could be the difference between people's lives, lots of homes, huge cost and damage. And one of the things that we learn when you talk with the experts from around the world and learn about this is what natural flood management does. It works better the more serious the flooding event. Because when you put in hard concrete structures, they can top over and then they don't work anymore and all the water comes over. Natural flood structures keep on working even when you're in the intensest tropical storm you could imagine. They still hold back some of the water and then they spread it out and it doesn't hurt. So that's really what I wanted to mostly say about the modelling. Now, I know there'll be tons of questions. There's a lot to take in, but it shows you the effectiveness of what can be achieved. Now, what we've got here is the kind of structures we can put in, what is natural flood management, and now Ollie's going to take you through this.
Cool. Thank you. Great. So this, thank you, Peter. I think we're really excited to have done that analysis and to have got that data because it really gives us a pathway forward to understanding what actions we can do in the valley and around the landscape. So natural flood management is exactly as it sounds. We're using nature to work with nature, and it goes by the concept of lots of small things everywhere. It's kind of like small is beautiful, E.F. Schumacher. Lots of small things everywhere, lots of little actions making lots of good positive influences everywhere. Makes a much bigger difference than one thing at the end of the line, which is almost too late. So, there we go. So, as you can see, there are lots of different solutions that we can work our way down through the valley, and they all have a different part to play. And they're all positioned in the landscape at the right position, so they have the greatest effect. You wouldn't want to put a woodland right at the bottom, you wouldn't want to put ponds and scrapes at the top. So leaky dams. Leaky dams are wood, coppiced. I mean, we're in the beautiful part of East Sussex and there's lots of chestnut coppice around. So we can take that and we can create leaky dams. They go across water structures, and the idea is that they're not holding back the water all year round. They're only going to hold back the water during flood events. They can be made in various different ways, but the idea is that we always have 30 centimetres below the dam so water can still run underneath it during normal situation. But in the flood event, the water level rises, it then hits the dam and spreads backwards across the ravine and the gully, and it saves 5, 10, 15 cubic meters. And if you're multiplying that by, say, we're going to do 300 leaky dams across the whole valley, then the maths is clear. Now, the great thing about leaky dams is that it's a free resource because we've got the chestnut coppice. We can work with organizations that can do this as a sort of a learning, educational process, so it can be cheap to install, and they improve with age. Soil aeration and soil health. Soil is probably the biggest mitigator of flood and water control. Soil and its structure can hold so much more water than annual crops and scrapes or ponds or any other sort of dam that we can do. What we're looking for is, and this is what Tim practices, this is Tim Jury, who's a sort of local farmer, as you all know. He practices regenerative farming, mob grazing, and that allows the cows and the animals to continually move around the landscape. That allows the grasses to grow up tall, and as they grow up tall, the roots grow deeper underneath, and that's creating more soil structure, it's creating more soil microbiology that allows more carbon in the soil and more biology to hold on to that water. And that's what we need, is we need the water to trickle down the valley and absorb into the soil rather than glide off. The longer the grass, the deeper the roots, and the more interesting the soil structure. Obviously that has natural good benefits towards carbon and biodiversity as well. Cross slope planting and buffer strips. This is, it could be trees, hedges, wildflower meadows. We talked about earlier about social value in our landscape, about trying to create landscapes that are interesting and beautiful. Something like this at the top of the slope or at the bottom of the slope is a perfect example of exactly how these intricate ecosystems, when they grow up and interesting root structures, the water will hit that buffer strip and then soak back into the soil. And as Peter explained, we're not trying to stop the water, we're trying to slow the water down. These buffer strips are an amazing solution to slowing that water down before it gets into the stream. Now again, I love regenerative farming, silvopasture and all that, and I think planting trees like this has a huge positive benefit in the biodiversity in our agricultural landscape, as well as our aesthetic landscape as well. Complex woodland understory. At this point, Peter's the best person to take over from Malladams.
Okie doke. So this is close to my heart. So what we've got here is something we've done at Malladams, is try to restore wooded heath. Now, wooded heath is amazing. Look at all that heather, right? When a water drop hits that, the heather's root goes down a long way. It creates deep soil. So you get a lot more infiltration of water. But think of that water drop having to go all the way around every single complex route. Instead of traveling 50 meters through this lovely bit of restored wooded heath, it now has to travel 2 kilometers. The hydrostatic pressure of that water drop is held, all the energy, because this is some of the steepest slopes in Malladams, and it holds and it doesn't allow it to go through. The other thing we're doing at Malladams is creating wet woodland, right? Aldercar. And that is amazing because we think about having wet woodland as when the water comes, well, it's full of water, it's just going to slip off. No. All that sphagnum underneath there, as you get more water, it expands. I've stood in old wet woodlands where when they drained the water, the whole soil collapsed over 30 meters. When you're standing, right, think about it, when you're standing after you've drained it, you're actually dropped more than the height of this roof over, a period of 25 years. It all goes down. And then when it refills with water, the land rises again. A huge amount of water can be stored in boggy woodlands, basically. It's tremendous. It's just beyond measure. And of course, it will also be full of wildlife.
Wetlands, ponds, scrapes, swales, sediment traps, and offline water storage. So again, these are more expensive because it involves grounds workers, but we can create these structures in the landscape that can be used as holders and vehicles to grab hold of water as it exits streams or watercourses, to hold water for a period of time and discharge slowly. So a scrape is very much as it sounds. It's scraping the land away. It's probably only going down about half a metre or a metre. And then you're cutting in from a water course using that leaky dam. So you'll back up the water using the leaky dam. We can then discharge that over to the scrape, and that scrape over there will then hold on to that water for a period of time, maybe 6, 8, 10 hours, as that then goes back into the watercourse later. And so we've slowed down that flow so it doesn't reach at the end at Pett level in as fast amount of time. Sediment traps are so important. These work in a very similar way, but we're losing so much of our soil at the moment. It's very much in the news that we're losing our soil, we're losing our carbon, we're losing that microbiology, and sediment, and all that sediment goes down the watercourses and gets stuck in the rivers further down and causes much further environmental damage further down the watercourse. So we want to try and hold that sediment back up in the land. Ponds, they're adding great biodiversity into our landscape, as well as being offline storages for water. And then obviously wetlands have that ability to, as Peter was saying, to really soak up water through peaty carbon content and their root systems. And it's about ecosystems which are intricate and complex, that have the ability to grow into something more powerful than bricks and mortar. Now, I just want to underline everything by saying that the studies that the Green Curves organization have done have suggested that with our plan, that we can slow down the peak event by 50% using natural flood management, which is an amazing statistic, but it isn't the only solution. We also need to look at various other structures throughout the valley, whether that's discharges from southern water, whether that's the culvert. And our Green Curves have also done a whole analysis on the culvert and its redesign as well. So there needs to be lots of effort around. We are one big solution, but we're not the only solution, and we're not here to say that either. So what are we doing? We're using, and have done for the last 18 months, we've been using Green Curves to find, and lots of other people here who've given up their data, so thank you very much for that. The best scientific analysis of flooding and how we can tackle it. You've got to be data driven. We've got to understand what has happened in order to prove what we can do in the future. We can't just guess and come up with an idea and wing it, especially because we've been given the money from the EA. We are held to account. And we want to get the best value for money, which is again why we're not taking any funds ourselves as trustees, that all the money will be spent on the flood events, the flood actions. We also want to assist local landowners and local land managers to adopt these NFM measures, and there's lots of ways of doing that, either through us as consultants, us as advice, or we can help you, because the government have also got lots of great ways and grants to do some of these NFM measures, like buffer strips and hedgerows and wetlands and scrapes. These are all available through the government, and we're very much happy to sort of be part of that collaborative group and organisation to help farmers and land managers to get into that mindset and get those grants into the land. So this is the design and the plan that Green Curves have come up with, and it's publicly available on our website, so you can look into it in more detail. You can see here the yellow outlines of the land holdings that the trustees have management or ownership over, and they are the best placed because they are at some of the best placed because they are at the source of the water and the water streams. They contain most of the woodland, and woodland is one of the greatest ability to absorb water as well as soil. So if we look through here, and again we'll get into more detail, but we've got the red lines are leaky dams, we've got little water scrapes and ponds, We've got these green lines here, which are called, which are ditch stops, and these yellow lines here, which are called fascines, which are sort of woody fences. And then you've also got this interesting area around here, which is the buffer strips and the buffer tree plantations and hedgerows up there. Now, I'm just going to underline this as well. This is an ultimate design. This is the design as if we had ultimate control over everything, and that we had the ability and all the funding to be able to do everything. What we would like to do, and everything can be changed, but what we would like to do is to work with every landowner in the valley and initiate and act on these actions to create them, but obviously it's up to the landowner to engage with us as well. So this is, for example, an interesting story about a scrape or a bund. You can see here how the land down there is open, and then by creating a bund, that water here can all be held back. And that's what it might look like up there. It's a sort of pond, bund, scrape at the top in the valley, and we could litter these almost effectively throughout the valley. They would be dry most of the year, and then they'll be used as that offline storage during peak flows. This is an area that we've been working on in the last sort of 3-4 months. D's are ditch stops, F's are the fascines, and H's are the wooded hedges. So you can see there's not actually a huge amount of action that needs to happen. The red lines here are leaky dams. Again, they've illustrated around 80 to 100 leaky dams, but as an organisation we want to create 300 leaky dams across the whole valley. And you can see here, using this LiDAR topographical map, how a leaky dam works. The water continues down the stream, it hits the first leaky dam and backs up, then the next leaky dam and backs up, and then the next leaky dam and it backs up. And it's that continual holding of water throughout the valley that we're looking for. And again, you can get, this is why the science, and we've used green curves, because the leaky dam in the right location can be the most effective action that you can do. So this leaky dam here can hold back a lot more water than these three individual ones, but they both play a part in the solution. Ditches and water barriers. So we're looking at the ditches that we've created to drain water off the land for many, many years. And we're going to look at trying to create, very similar to leaky dams, but ditch stops in the ditches. So the water hits the ditch stop, which is a sort of wooded barrier. It flows back again and then topples over and goes down to the ditch stop. So it doesn't interfere with any agricultural systems. It's purely acting just like a leaky dam would. Again, these are another example of leaky dams. This is all through mallee dams. You've got the main stream running through here. And you can see here there's about 12 or 15 leaky dams there. There's a couple more there. But all these little sources of water running off through there can also have leaky dams. Water is a complex system, but it has a lot of things, a lot of small things that contribute to one big thing. And this is what we're trying to do, is we're trying to implement lots of small actions across the whole valley. Again, you can see how leaky dams and other sort of systems placed in the right location will hold back the maximum amount of water. So we're not just taking a look at a landscape and going, we'll put one there, we'll put one there. This is data that we've got from green curves and a design that is the ultimate solution to reduce the peak flow by 50%. Detention dams. Now they are more concrete structures. They're looking at places where we already have bridges in place on a water stream, but a correctly designed detention dam with a correctly sized circumference and area will hold back water in the course of the stream and prevent any flooding further down the hill. So we believe, again, this is all we're trying to do, is not to hold back water for days. We're trying to hold back water for a couple of hours to allow the peak flow to go from that instead of the high curve, we go to a low curve, and that's what we're trying to do. So a detention dam is something that we can look at in a couple of years' time once we've explored our natural flood management systems. So, when are we doing it? 2025, this year. We've already started. We're going to install 200 leaky dams across the valley. We've got a couple of contractors in place already. We've tested them out, made sure that they're good enough, and we're going to be installing 200 leaky dams. And we're also going to be focusing on our woodland restoration. Woodland restoration is so important to absorb that water into those massive bodies of organic matter that can hold the water down in the valley. 2026, we're then going to be doing some more interesting stuff. So we've done a lot of the hard work in 2025. 2026 is then looking at the scrapes, those fascines, further leaky dams, offline ponds, buffer zones, and soil aeration. So we're adding layers to the complex systems that we're creating so that these complex layers get stronger and stronger, and the water, the way it flows through the ecosystems, is a more complicated process, reducing that peak flow. And then finally, in 2027, we're going to be looking at detention dams. Now, we've raised this money through the EA. We have obligation to perform the grant that we applied for. So we are looking to raise further funds for this valley and for the project after our EA grant. And as a charity, we're no longer looking just for the slow flow movement. We believe in the whole valley as a nature reserve and a beautiful place to live. It's in the high weald, and we will be looking to raise a lot of funding to create nature-based solutions throughout the whole valley. I'm going to pass you back over to Peter. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ollie. That was magnificent. Such enthusiasm. Right. Does it work? Is it all just conjecture? Is it fantasy? Is it make-believe? Well, no. We're going to prove it works, statistically, without any shadow of a doubt. So, we've already installed these 4 flow and level meters. Fancy things. They use radar. And then the Doppler effect, so they know how fast the water moves, they know how deep the water is, and we've already profiled the stream at the different heights, so we know the volume of water. We've also installed a couple of more simple level meters. But this has been designed so we know that every bit of work we do on the land in the project, we know if it makes a difference. So when we crunch the numbers, we'll be able to see, from knowing what the rainfall is in the valley and knowing what the volume of water passing these points is, we can see really, really well if we've made any difference. And so that's the whole point. Last week I was going with the data modelers at the EA to a fine degree to prove all of this. We're getting audited on it, and it's all. So at the moment, thanks to our friends at Southern Water who've paid for this all, I've now got access to an online, because all these little monitors, they're connected to the mobile phone, and they give me the data in real time. And it gathers it all, and we can see and this is the actual flow for last week in the Marsham sewer. So at one of our points, and I've got them for all of the 4 points. So we're doing some other things. The same statistical analysis will be done on water quality and the river health. There's a thing called morph analysis, which is studying river health. We'll look at that. We'll look at ammonia, phosphates, turbidity, dissolved solids, conductivity, all the things you need to know, regularly tested to see if they're improved by the efforts we've put in. And we're doing tons of biodiversity. So I'm a bit of an ecologist, and unfortunately Dr. Barry Yates can't be here. He's the other ecologist. We've been totally nerding out on the automatic bird bat detectors. We've got the valley totally wired for detecting automatically with artificial intelligence every species that flies by, and then that data goes into the big number crunching machine, and by the end of the project we'll be able to tell statistically if we've improved the wildlife in the valley. and you can have a look yourself at this website, which is available. You can actually see what birds are flying around, and you'll be amazed at what we're doing. So we've got it all on a big computer model. Over the next couple of years, you'll see this model totally populated with all the structures we install. We've already installed our test leaky dams, the blue ones there. We've started with all our monitoring. We've even been looking at all of the different impediments to flow inside Pett level itself. Some people helped us. Chris here was did a full report for our modelers. So that's all going up. And this is the fancy website you can go to. And you can email me for the link later on if you didn't have time to write that down. And you can see in real time, literally within a second, what birds are flying around in the valley. And we've got that data. It's not on a website, but it will be hopefully for bats and other things when we do all that monitoring. So that's what's happening at the moment. Now, the big thing to do now is to think about how we all can play a role. We can't do this, we can do a bit, but we can't do everything. We need to persuade people to be part of the project, persuade, hopefully inspire, and by working with others. And I know a lot of landowners are very skeptical, and they've got a right to be, they're the landowner. But we want to make it financially viable for them to think about helping in this structure. Also, all of that modelling didn't just do the natural flood management, it also did all the other things, other forms, and that's what Ollie pointed out. And it's so important that the work we're doing does not replace. It isn't so that you can go, I'll wash my hands of that business, leave it all to these mad hippies. No, that's not what we're about. So now, I would like to, it's the end of the talk, so now's your chance to have your own say and ask questions of the trustees. If I hand over...
So Karen's got a microphone.
Yeah. Okay, Karen's got the microphone. Karen Burgess, one of our trustees. We're neighbours, aren't we, Karen? We wave. And Craig Sams is owner of Stony Link and very well known in his circles. And we are happy to answer any of your questions.